Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. Our last show before the 4th of July. I'm Amber Duke, back again with Niall Stanage.
And a very patriotic sweater.
Had to do it.
For the final day before July 4th.
Good
for you. Great
Thank
to see you.
Well, it's looking like the House will be voting on President Trump's big, beautiful bill any minute now.
At around 3:30 this morning, the House cleared a final procedural hurdle, 219 to 213, that they needed to advance the bill to a debate and then a final vote. Earlier Wednesday, Speaker Johnson held a different procedural vote that was open for 7 hours.
During this time, Trump and Johnson corralled any holdouts and tried to convince them to vote on the measure. One of those previous holdouts, Congressman Ralph Norman, struck a different tone after talking with the president and the speaker. Let's listen.
What this president has done is lay out where we are and lay out the fact that we can live the fight another day. Their meetings, I just left a meeting of about 20 people who had concerns like I did. They're getting the questions answered. But we all want what President Trump wants. He's doing a great job, and we'll see if we can get there.
This morning, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has been using the magic minute, which is a time frame before the final vote where they can speak as long as he wants to trash the bill in this case. Let's listen.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to Donald Trump's one big, ugly bill. Every single Democrat stands in strong opposition to this bill because we're standing up for the American people.
If the House passes the bill this morning, it will, of course, head to the president's desk, where Trump is expected to sign it in ceremonial fashion tomorrow on the 4th of July.
I would assume we both expect this to pass at this point, right?
At this point, yeah, and I'm kind of surprised because I thought that the fiscal conservatives were going to put up more of a fight. We had multiple people expressing misgivings about the Senate version of the bill yesterday, including Chip Roy, Ralph Norman, of course, Thomas Massie, Warren Davidson, Andy Harris, even Marjorie Taylor Greene last week said that she did not like the Senate version. But if they are advancing to a floor vote, then Speaker Johnson wouldn't have done that unless he believed he had the votes for it to pass.
Right, exactly. And to me, that sort of points out to one of the things that seems to me to often happen, regardless of which party is in the majority, where there is this sort of rather performative element of raising objections and then just ceding the ground at the last moment. And I can actually, to a degree, understand Trump's frustration, which of course he was voicing on Truth Social last night, saying, what's the delay and why aren't Republicans voting for this? Because if you have real objections and those objections aren't addressed, then just vote against it. But a lot of the time what we're seeing is these objections being raised, people kind of making a show of themselves, but then ultimately voting for it anyway. In some cases, yes, they have elicited actual changes from that in the Senate. We were talking yesterday about Lisa Murkowski and some of these provisions that are plainly aimed to benefit Alaska and to get her vote. But otherwise, it's just people, I think, in Congress thinking that more attention is paid to the sort of inner workings, or, oh, we held a procedural vote open for 5 or 7 hours. Okay, fantastic. But like nobody really cares about that once the thing is done, right?
Yeah, that's very true. There was also an interesting moment yesterday with Republican Congressman Derek Van Orden, where he was asked by a Punchbowl reporter about the, let's say, orders coming down from President Trump. And this was how he responded. He said, "The President of the United States didn't give us an assignment. We're not a bunch of little bitchs around here, okay? I'm a member of Congress. I represent almost 800,000 Wisconsinites." But then Niall, his press office, got involved and accused the reporter of being dishonest, saying this is why the American public can't stand the mainstream press. The reporter failed to provide the context of her question, which asked if the Republican Party is being led by the nose by President Trump, and she conveniently admitted the rest of his response. So I replied to the tweet, and I said, could you please share the quote of the full response? And I haven't had a reply yet. And then, interestingly enough, Daily Caller News Foundation reporter Adam Pack was there when he had this sort of lashing out moment and said, no, it was actually exactly as the reporter described it.
Yeah, and I mean, it is, I think, more and more a tendency of press offices and other comms people to be like, oh, you just can't trust the mainstream media. Look, sometimes the media gets things wrong. It's imperfect, but the constant falling back to that excuse or rationalization when it sounds to all intents and purposes like the reporter was completely accurate there. And I find the lamestream media kind of tiresome in those sort of moments, to be honest.
Yeah, and I thought it was silly, and he apparently actually cut her off mid-question to sort of launch into this tirade about not being little bitchs,
yes.
Which was interesting. I mean, the other thing, of course, that's worth talking about is what's actually in the bill and what was changed in the Senate version. Despite being asked to touch it very, very lightly from the House, the Senate made a lot of changes.
Right.
You mentioned the, of course, Alaska handout for Lisa Murkowski. The parliamentarian took a lot of measures out, saying that they violated the Byrd rule, including getting all non-citizens off of Medicaid. There's now a limit to how much states can be reimbursed when they have non-citizens on the Medicaid payroll. Also added $25 billion to Medicaid for rural hospitals, and got rid of that federal land sale provision that Mike Lee wanted in it, and also includes the no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, as well as tax reform for seniors. But those all expire after 3 years, which it's Congress, they'll be extended. But
right. Well, and to that point, I mean, that's one of the objections that Rand Paul raised in one of his speeches, and Thomas Massey. Paul, speaking in the Senate, was talking about the fact that even though the cost of this bill over a decade is very, very considerable, about $3.3 trillion, Paul's argument is that the way legislation is written, and you just gave some perfect examples of it, basically means that the implication is that the fiscal ship will be righted slightly in the latter half. And Paul's argument is it very rarely is, because the things that cost money, like tax cuts or whatever, are just extended.
And one of the arguments from people who are very aggressively supporting the bill, as opposed to raising these concerns, is that the funding for border security outweighs the concerns about the deficit. There's $170 billion to border security, including $29.85 billion for ICE to hire 8,500 agents, $45 billion to increase ICE detention capacity, and $46.55 billion for border wall construction, among other measures. So for people who voted for Trump because they were very concerned about illegal immigration, that would be the piece that they would look at and say, okay, I care about that.
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, look, he was elected. He's going to try and get his priorities funded to the maximum extent possible. One thing that I dislike about the bill is, for all the talk when Elon was to the fore about he's cutting these other softer measures now and he's going to turn his attention to the Pentagon, there's about $150 billion on top of an already massive Pentagon budget in this. And I think that sits actually uneasily, even with Trump's professed views in a lot of ways.
That was a huge missed opportunity, I think, for fiscal conservatives to go after that massive defense spending budget. And meanwhile, you have Mike Lawler joining with Gottheimer on the other side to advance a bill that would give B-2 bombers to Israel now.
Right, yeah, so, yeah. Dubious about that.
Meanwhile, Sean Diddy Combs dropped to his knees and prayed after the verdict in his bombshell trial. Hear why next.